A young man goes missing after a date with someone he met online.
He had met a girl on Snapchat. I didn't know her.
Then he had not shown up for work.
He would have checked in with somebody. Deep down, I knew something was wrong.
When detectives get their first break in the case, they immediately suspect foul play.
I noticed blood on the tailgate. Looked like it had probably been washed out with a water hose.
There was also blood spattering on the back windshield.
In such a remote area, locating a body is a nearly impossible task.
There's actually hundreds of oil sites in the very rural areas of Jefferson-Davis County.
They're very secluded, be a good place to commit a crime, and possibly there could be a dead body laying close to one of these well sites.
But when investigators follow the trail of evidence, it leads to a catfishing killer.
This is a case about a young man who met a girl and wanted an adventure, but it turns out that the girl had a sinister motive.
She lured this young gentleman. I mean, what normal person would even think to do that?
The video footage was captured on Sunday, and lo and behold, there it is. He's driving the truck. Everybody is considered a suspect at that time.
How could she do it by herself?
September 6th, 2022. It's a Tuesday morning in the small town of Pearl, Mississippi, when Darlene Sistrunk arrives at the Rankin County Sheriff's Department to report her son Carson missing.
Darlene reported that they last saw Carson on the afternoon of Sunday, September 4th, and this was Labor Day weekend.
That particular weekend, I left with some friends to go to Texas to this wedding. He just told his dad he was just going out. He didn't say where he was going or who he was meeting or anything. He said, well, I love you and be careful. Monday morning, his dad got up and went on to work like normal, and he didn't really pay attention that Carson's truck was not there. I got back in Monday evening after Labor Day.
Darlene says that when Carson still hadn't checked in by that evening, she started to get concerned.
I waited till about 7:38, and I texted him. I said, are you on your way back home? And didn't get a response. I called, and there was no answer. It went to voicemail. So, of course, I was up all night long.
Because it was the Labor Day weekend, Carson did not have work on Monday.
Tuesday, Carson was supposed to be at work, so I called his friend that he worked with. He said, Carson is not here.
Darlene tells the deputies that she contacted Carson's bank to see if he'd recently used his debit card.
They know that I'm on Carson's account. I just told them, look, can you look back on the transactions that Carson has made from yesterday? And they said, yeah. Here's one for gas at New Hebron gas station. Well, hung up, and I said, in my mind, I said, we don't know anybody from New Hebron.
New Hebron is a tiny rural community located 51 miles south of Pearl. Bank records show the withdrawal occurred around 8:30 p.m. Sunday night, a few hours after Carson was last seen. That's when Darlene decided it was time to contact authorities. But by the time she arrived at the sheriff's office, she'd remembered something.
Carson had met a girl on Snapchat. My thinking is maybe he went that evening to meet her.
Police need to try to ascertain some information He decided to go off for a few days and just don't want to be contacted? Or is it that he needs help?
I think it was September 6th is whenever I was told that everyone was kind of looking for Carson. Deep down, I knew something was wrong because just the way that Carson is, he would have checked in with somebody. Obviously, his phone was blowing up, right? You know, everybody's looking for him. He's not getting back with anybody.
I had a bad gut feeling. I just really started praying and just saying, you know, Carson, where are you?
Carson Monroe Sistrunk was born December 16, 1997 in Flowood, Mississippi.
I had 3 sons, and Carson was the baby of the 3. He was the smallest. He was bubbly, just a joy, you know, for us. He loved the outside, and as he grew older, my husband would take him hunting.
Carson's love of the outdoors was something he shared with his best friend, Tanner Gray.
Carson and I grew up together. Our moms were best friends, so it was kind of just, we had to be best friends, you know, and we did everything together. We loved the outdoors. Whenever we got older, we would house sit actually a good bit for one of the guys in our church, and he has a setup out there, like a little range, and Carson and I would get the .22 pistol and shoot the target.
Although Carson was born the smallest of his brothers, by the time he was a teenager, he'd become larger than life.
I think it was kind of the joke that we just nicknamed him Little Man. You know, the dude stood at 6'4", right at 300 pounds. I mean, the guy was not a little man. We were able to make that joke with him because he was so tenderhearted.
He was a gentle giant. Yep. A teddy bear. When he graduated and he got his truck, we had Little Man put on the tag.
He had a Ford Raptor, and he loved it. You know, he loved to drive. That was his baby.
After graduating high school in 2016, Carson went off to college to pursue his passion.
Carson went to diesel mechanic school to be a welder, and he loved it. And then he also transitioned into being a gunsmith.
He would go to work at 7 and work to 3:30 at the welding place, and then leave there and then go to his gunsmith job.
He would build guns, he set up guns. He knew everything there was to know about a gun. So it was just cool to see him flourish in what he loved to do.
By 24, Carson seemed to already have his life figured out.
He had great parents, he had great friends. He had had a few previous relationships that didn't pan out. I think that made him kind of keep his cards close to him. He was a very private person. He may not say exactly where he was going or what he was doing, but if he's going to be gone for like a weekend or something, he would say, I'll be back, you know, this day.
Now, Carson's loved ones fear the worst due to his unusual silence.
When Miss Darlene came in and made her missing person report, she stated that there was a girl that Carson had met online.
Carson had told me that he had met a girl on Snapchat. And I said, oh, okay. And he had told me, he said that he had met her a couple of times. I didn't know her.
When there's a missing persons report, some of the first steps are to check hospitals, to check jails. All those leads came up with nothing. Law enforcement applied for an exigent circumstance warrant with the cell phone company to ping his last location. That location came up to New Hebron, Mississippi at the same general time as that last transaction with his credit card.
Rankin County sheriffs put out an alert on Carson's truck.
Carson drove a Ford Raptor. It was silver in color, and it had a very distinctive darker colored hood. It was just by happenstance that there was a sheriff with the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department that was in the area and happened to see the vehicle, and he called it in.
Sheriff's deputy actually saw that truck at the Old Hebron Grocery in Lawrence County.
But the deputy didn't see anyone matching Carson's description and waits for backup to avoid scaring potential witnesses away.
There are several individuals around the vehicle. Everybody is considered a suspect that's around that vehicle at that time until you can weed them out and find out what their connection is to Carson's trunk. Why were they there around that truck?
Coming up, investigators discover a shady transaction.
She said she purchased it from a man, and she gave the name that he went by as C Money.
And surveillance footage exposes Carson's last known location.
You could see a figure inside the passenger side, but you could not identify who it was.
While Carson's sistrunk remains missing, detectives have located his vehicle in New Hebron, Mississippi.
New Hebron, Mississippi is a very rural town. A lot of farmland. Oil and gas wells are very prevalent in that area.
When investigators arrive at the grocery store, they find a group of people gathered around the truck. One of them is a young woman.
She had the keys to the truck. There were several other people around who said she was the one who had been driving that truck.
She identified herself as Sierra Inscoe at that point.
Detectives ask Sierra if she's the woman Carson was supposed to meet. She claims to have no idea what they're talking about.
Sierra said that she did not know who Carson's sistrunk was.
Obviously, they asked about how she came to be in possession of this vehicle. She said that she bought it from somebody.
She produced a bill of sale-like document that she had purchased the truck for $16,000, and she said she purchased it from a man, and she gave the name that he went by as C Money.
However, a quick glance makes investigators question the legitimacy of the document.
Of course, you could look and tell that it was not a real bill of sale because it's just written on a piece of paper. The thing about it is you can't just discard that information and assume that she's lying about the transaction or about her story.
Sierra says she doesn't know C Money's real name or how the truck came into his possession. However, she reveals that he likely stole it based on their frightening interaction.
Sierra said that she had been threatened by him if she ever talked about anything, that he would kill her.
There was 3 males there with her at the truck. I got to find out what their connection is to Carson's sistrunk, if they knew Carson's sistrunk, what their connection is to Sierra Inscoe.
None of the men identify themselves as C Money, but they say Sierra has driven them around for the past few days. They recently met the 20-year-old at work as she just moved to the area.
I met Sierra through mutual friends. We'd be in classes together, and then we just, grew a friendship through that. She was a very nice person. She was very, tomboyish. She was the only girl on the football team in high school. She was a very well-known person, for sure, because she just had, a very big personality, so everybody knew of her. She was struggling, with her parents because she didn't have her mom in the picture, and then her dad wasn't home much either. She never stayed in school. Whenever she moved to Mississippi, we did not talk much at all. and she told me that she was going to be moving there for a welding job.
Sierra struggled to find stability and continued to move around, living with various friends and family.
She had lived in Florida. She lived in Tennessee. She stayed with her mother on very few occasions, who lived there in the northwest side of Jeff Davis County. Some of the farmers, the chicken farmers up in that area, she'll work for them. Sometimes she'll stay at some of their trailers on their property. We're trying to determine where Sierra really hung out a lot and stayed, but she was a drifter.
Unfamiliar with the new face in town, investigators bring Sierra Inscoe into the Rankin County Sheriff's Office for a formal interview to learn more about her and the vehicle purchase.
Sierra was picked up by the Rankin County Sheriff's Office investigators, and they also took the truck with them.
Sierra says the last place she and her friends went was an old oil well in Jefferson Davis County.
There's actually hundreds of oil well sites in the very rural areas of Jefferson Davis County.
She said that her and some of her friends like to go to these gas well locations and party and smoke weed and stuff like that.
Detectives find her story suspicious, so they ask her to show them the oil wells she and her friends went to.
The gas wells are small little plots of dirt that usually square. There may be a piece of pipe sticking out of the ground with some valves on it and a few tanks on the side.
Sierra reluctantly agrees, but detectives' suspicions grow when she suddenly seems to forget where she went.
She kept on redirecting every time she could. Instead of pointing to the actual oil site, she pointed them to another one. And that was one of those rabbit trails that was very frustrating to law enforcement.
After several miscues, Sierra finally guides investigators to a remote well. After a brief search, they find evidence it's the correct place.
We actually brought Carson's vehicle down to the well site. It was on a record, on a rollback record.
In fact, the tire trucks that were at that oil site matched Carson's truck.
Considering Sierra's strange behavior, detectives wonder if she knows what really happened here.
The gas wells, they're very secluded. They're surrounded by trees. Be a good place to commit a crime. And possibly there could be a dead body laying close to one of these well sites.
Carson Sistrunk has been missing for over 48 hours. And while Sierra Inscoe claims she doesn't know where he is, investigators suspect she's lying. To aid in their ongoing search, the New Hebron Sheriff's Department enlists the aid of the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations.
We've come in to assist when called upon by the local sheriff's offices or police departments. When I got the call, it was a little after midnight on the 7th of September, 2022. The truck had been placed on a flatbed wrecker. When I walked by the truck with my flashlight, I just shined the light on the truck just to look at it.
With the new perspective, Agent Riley notices something alarming.
I noticed blood on the bottom of the tailgate. You could see the remnants of blood inside the truck in the cracks. Some debris that was back there looked like it had probably been washed out with a water hose at some point. And up under the truck, there was a large amount of what appeared to be blood on the underside of the bed and on top of the spare tire. I knew that something bad had happened to somebody or something.
When asked about the blood, Sierra has a seemingly innocent explanation.
Miss Inscoe claimed that she'd hit a deer and had thrown it in the back of the truck. That's where the blood came from.
But with no collision damage to the truck, detectives find that difficult to believe.
She was actually detained and taken back to Rankin County.
While Sierra is taken into custody, Agent Riley calls one of the Bureau's forensic units to the scene.
In the course of their documenting this vehicle, they found some bags that contained clothes in the back of the vehicle. Those clothes would traditionally have been worn by a female. It appeared that there was some blood spatter on those clothes.
They took samples from inside the truck, from in the bed of the truck, underneath the truck, and did their job very well. And all that stuff was taken to the crime lab and to a DNA lab in Jackson.
There was also blood spattering on the back windshield of the truck. And what that implied to law enforcement that somebody had been sitting in the back of the truck, could very well have been shot.
By the time the inspection is complete, it's morning, and investigators have enough light to search the area for any sign of Carson.
I took my metal detectors up there and we searched that whole well site area to see if we could locate any shell casings.
They searched extensively for any other evidence, but found nothing. They couldn't find anything other than those tire tracks.
Sierra seemed to be real deceptive in her answers. It really wastes a lot of time when a suspect tells you a story that's not true.
It occurs to Agent Riley that if their suspicions about Sierra are correct, she could have easily led them to the wrong oil site to throw them off.
I got to thinking about what Miss Inscoe had said several hours earlier about her frequenting these gas well locations. And that led me to believe that she was familiar with a lot of them. So I called a friend of mine who checking and reading the meters and stuff on them on a daily basis. I called him and I said, look, please have your guys that's checking these wells, have them all over the next couple of days, be real observant, be watching for things out of the ordinary. And within 15 or 20 minutes, he called me and said one of his drivers had just found a body.
Coming up, detectives confirm Sierra has been lying to them.
She didn't have a job. She shouldn't have money to have a truck like it.
But is it proof she committed murder?
She stuck with her story.
C-Money was probably the most wanted man in southeast Mississippi.
After 3 days missing, a body matching Carson Sistrunk's description has been located at an oil well site in New Hebron. Investigators immediately drive out to the second site, which is located a few miles away.
It's a dirt road, and as you get on top of the well site area, you can see tracks, and they stop, and then they back up into a bunch of kudzu vines. That's where the body was laying.
Decomposition was very bad. There was maggots on the body, flies, and you could tell it had been there for a couple of days.
It's full-fledged summer in September here, and with the heat, it's not uncommon that a body could decompose in 2.5, 3 days.
The damage to the body makes it nearly impossible to determine cause of death or to make a positive ID.
I was pretty confident that that was Carson Sistrunk's body laying there, but without confirmation from the state medical examiner, I couldn't say that.
Everything was collected, put in body bags, and turned over to the coroner and sent to the crime lab.
Once we found the body. We had good reason to believe that it was a homicide. That's when I knew I had to question Miss Inscoe some more to try to figure out the truth of what happened.
While the body is transported to the state medical examiner's office, investigators return to Rankin County to interrogate Sierra Inscoe.
She stuck to her story that she had told the investigators earlier that day. On no Carson Sistrunk. I've never seen Carson Sistrunk. I don't know anything about a body. You got the wrong person.
Law enforcement did not have any concrete evidence to show that Sierra stole the truck. It could very well have been that somebody gave Sierra the keys and she had the truck in good faith.
We conferred with the district attorney's office, and they said we did not have enough information to hold her. That's when we really had to release her from jail. It's frustrating, but you have to run every lead down.
Detectives need solid evidence to refute Sierra's story, so they go back to the one place they know both she and Carson had been.
Carson's last credit card transaction was at an ATM at a New Hebron Quick Stop gas station, and that was done at 8:39 p.m.
We talked to the owner of the store, found the video footage of the day and time in question.
The video footage was captured on Sunday, September the 4th, a little after 8 p.m. And lo and behold, there it is. He's driving the truck.
As Carson pulls up to a gas pump, investigators see he isn't alone.
There's a glare on the windshield and off the hood of the truck, and you could see a figure inside the passenger side, but you could not identify who it was. He gets out, comes inside, uses his debit card.
It was tremendous for us to be able to look and to verify the same clothing that Carson had on was the same clothing that was on the body we found at that well site.
While Carson pays for the gas inside, a different man approaches the truck.
What I noticed immediately was that the male subject that came up to the passenger in Mr. Sistrunk's vehicle, it was obvious that they knew each other. You could tell by his body language, and they talked for probably a minute or so.
The biggest question for investigators at this point is who is sitting in the front seat of Carson's truck. Sierra, she said that a guy named C Money sold her the truck. So law enforcement wanted to check to see if this guy in the surveillance video was actually C Money.
We were able to locate the person, the male subject, by showing the video footage to some people in the area. And his name was Curly.
This man frequented that area. Once they found Curly, they showed him a copy of the surveillance video, and he was able to identify the person sitting in the front seat of Carson's vehicle as Sierra Inscoe.
Curly said that he knew Sierra Inscoe personally. They had dated in the past, and he was very adamant that that's who it was in the truck.
Despite the connection, Curly says he isn't the C Money they're looking for.
After we identified him and knowing his background and everything, we ruled him out pretty quick.
But his statement, combined with the surveillance video, gives detectives proof that Sierra lied to them.
Once we identified Miss Inscoe as being in the truck with Carson at the Quick Stop, she was our prime suspect.
Speaking with locals on the party scene, investigators track down some acquaintances who knew Sierra and ask what they know.
According to some eyewitnesses, they had seen Mr. Sistrunk with her before, a couple of weeks prior to him being murdered.
The investigators have some friends saying that she was going to get a new vehicle before her birthday. And all of a sudden, she's riding around in one.
The people we interviewed said that they knew she didn't have a job, she shouldn't have money to have a truck like that, and it kind of made them nervous because they didn't think she had, actually bought the truck.
Some of the people investigators spoke to reported seeing blood in the bed of the truck. And when they asked Sierra what happened, she told different people different stories.
She'd say she had a deer, she had a dog, she had a hog. I think she told somebody that even the person that owned the truck's sister had hit a deer.
Sierra had showed up Sunday night late and wanted to rinse out the truck.
She seemed to be acting strange, acting different, like she hadn't acted a few days before.
They knew something was up. They didn't want to get in it. They didn't want to get near it. Everybody was on to her and wanted no part of it.
The circumstantial evidence against Sierra Inscoe is growing by the minute. But it's not yet enough to charge her with murder.
For an investigator to have enough evidence to obtain a murder warrant for anybody, you at least need to know how they died. We had to get the autopsy completed. The state medical examiner's office performed an autopsy.
The cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds, 2 to the chest and 1 to the head, and every one of them had a slightly upward trajectory. He had to be above the gun.
The bullet that came from the body was in fragments. The only thing that they were able to determine was that it came from a 9mm gun.
Identifying the body is more difficult, but the medical examiner is able to lift a clear fingerprint.
The victim was identified as Carson Sistrom. And once those fingerprints came back as him, then the charges were taken out.
It was unthinkable. We can't still wrap our head around what happened and how it happened,
2 days after her release, authorities are now armed with an arrest warrant for Sierra Inscoe.
I went to an address in Jones County, Mississippi, along with several other agents. We surrounded the house. She came out with her hands up. It was a very uneventful arrest, thank goodness.
I didn't really believe it at first, but then I was like, wow, I guess this is possible. I do think that she was capable of doing it for attention.
On the day of the arrest, she wanted to talk to me again.
Once again, Sierra claims she bought the truck from the mysterious C Money. But this time, she gives detectives more to go on.
She said his first name was Corey, but she didn't know his last name, that he got orders to move dope and do things, that there was gang affiliations.
Although she's lied to them before, investigators consider the possibility that she's giving them an accomplice.
Carson was a very above average size. I don't think there'd be any way that she would be able to lift his body into the bed of the truck by herself.
C Money was probably the most wanted man in southeast Mississippi for the next 7 to 14 days.
I sought out other state agencies' help, Bureau of Narcotics, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, FBI. Nobody could identify this person.
We all made the decision that, it's a fictitious person. He doesn't exist, and we just stopped chasing that rabbit hole.
None of Sierra's local friends seem to have helped her either.
All their alibis checked out. We had ruled out any other suspects with the exception of Miss Inscoe.
How did she do it by herself? And that was a question that we wrestled with for a while.
Hoping for another link between Sierra and Carson, investigators obtain a search warrant for Sierra's social media accounts.
We were able to obtain the Snapchat records, which showed that there was communication between his account and her account. The gist of the conversation was Carson stated, "I'm going to be leaving soon, maybe a little late," and then her response was something along the lines of, "Okay."
I believe that Miss Inscoe lured Carson Sistrunk to a location in New Hebron. When they met, they traveled from that location to the place that we found him at that gas well site. I believe they were just going there to have a good time.
I don't know if he could have taken her out and maybe showed her how to shoot a gun. He carried a gun in the side of the truck. And then he also had like a small little pistol in the console that he carried.
Based on the forensic analysis of the truck, it looks as if that Carson was probably sitting on the tailgate of the truck and that Sierra was on the grounds. Something happened. She took his gun and she shot him.
The trajectories of those shots were slightly upward, indicated to us that he was most likely sitting on the tailgate of the vehicle when he was shot, and then he fell into the back of the vehicle.
I believe she backed the truck up real quick, slammed on brakes, he fell out, and she took off.
Forensic testing confirms investigators' theory about the shooting.
The blood that was sent off for DNA analysis, the blood that was on the truck belonged to Carson Sistrunk. The spots on the clothes inside the truck were verified to be blood, and that was also Carson's blood.
After analysis by the crime lab, it was confirmed that the DNA on the clothes we found in the truck came back to Sierra Inscoe.
Now it's up to prosecutors to convince a jury that the 21-year-old young woman turned into a murderer.
When you get to a trial, you have to build that case to a jury. In a murder case, you don't have that victim to talk. You have to talk for them. It's my job to paint that picture for the jury.
After a years-long investigation, the evidence seems to prove Sierra Inscoe is the one who murdered Carson Sistrunk. The question now facing prosecutors is why. They believe the answer is greed.
This is a case about a young man who met a girl and wanted an adventure, and it turns out that the girl that he thought was fun had a sinister motive. She had told many people that she was going to have a truck by her birthday, and he had a very nice truck.
I just think she felt unloved and that she was trying to, find a connection with somebody. She was trying so hard to have friends and fit in everywhere, and it just wasn't working out. So she was trying to gain these things in order to fit in properly and stuff, and I guess the truck was one of them.
Miss Inscoe lured this young gentleman, good home life, good parents, involved in the church, and she took all that away from him just for his truck. I mean, what normal person would even think to do that?
The trial is scheduled for July 2024, nearly 2 years after Carson was murdered. But the case never makes it to court.
Ultimately, she pled guilty to second-degree murder.
It didn't really shock me because of the multitude of evidence that we had against her.
She was imposed with 40 years in the Mississippi Department of Corrections. 5 of those years is suspended. She has to serve 35, and then those 5 years will be served on post-release supervision. There is also no doubt that she will serve every day of that 35 years.
During her plea hearing, Sierra is offered the opportunity to speak directly to Carson's family.
She gave an allocution that lasted 10 minutes, and I'll never forget. She opened with, "I did it, I'm sorry, I killed him." And that was the first time that anybody had ever heard those words out of her mouth.
She cried. She begged the family for forgiveness, that she didn't know why she did it, that she acted alone, that no one else was with her.
I feel like justice was served to her. I feel like that she should have gotten life, but she will serve what she was given.
I think Sierra snapped because she was trying to keep up to a certain standard. She was trying to keep up with all the lies that she was telling. She was trying to, be a person she wasn't.
Miss Inscoe ultimately took Carson Sistrunk's life to take his truck to show off to her buddies. That just shows you how evil Miss Inscoe is.
I think the lesson to take away from this case would probably be, to be very wary about who you place your trust in, especially in the world we live in today where we can instantly connect with people hundreds of miles away. People just need to be careful.
Carson was loved, by a lot of people. There was over 700 people that came to the memorial service.
Man, Carson would love to see this. How much support he has. Being a pallbearer at your best friend's funeral it's tough. You've spent your whole life together, and now you're carrying him to his grave, where he's going to stay for the rest of eternity.
Carson had that way about him that drew people in. It was that sweet, tender spirit. He was the best of us.
I think just having someone in your life like Carson, you were blessed. If I could say something to Carson right now, it'd be, I miss you. I miss you, Bubba. I miss you every day.
I have to say that the 24 years that we had Carson was the time that the Lord allowed us to have him. And truly, it was a joy. It was a joy.
The digital landscape of the 21st century has reshaped how human connections are forged, offering a seamless medium for friendship while simultaneously presenting unprecedented vulnerabilities. In the quiet, close-knit communities of Mississippi, a tragedy unfolded in the late summer of the year 2022 that served as a somber reminder of these dual realities. This is the story of Carson Monroe Sistrunk, a young man of exemplary character, whose life was cut short by a deceptive scheme driven by material greed and the meticulous collaborative law enforcement investigation that ultimately dismantled a killer web of falsehoods. By examining the psychological motives, the intricate investigative clues, and the tragic sequence of events, society can glean profound lessons on personal safety in the digital age while honoring the relentless pursuit of justice. Born on December 16, 1997, in Fluid, Mississippi, Carson was the youngest of three brothers. Affectionately nicknamed Little Man by those who loved him, Carson grew up to be anything but small, standing at an impressive 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighing nearly 300 pounds. Yet his imposing physical stature was entirely contrasted by a remarkably gentle, tender-hearted, and bubbly personality. He was a classic gentle giant, a young man who possessed a deep love for the outdoors, a passion he shared with his father and his lifelong best friend, Tanner Gray. Whether they were target shooting with a small caliber pistol, fishing, or spending quiet afternoons in the woods, Carson thrived in nature. After graduating from high school in the year 2016, Carson channeled his hands-on skills into a promising career path. He attended vocational school to become a welder, working diligently from 7 in the morning until 3:30 in the afternoon. Before transitioning to his second job as a gunsmith, Carson was a young man who knew the value of hard work and was highly respected for his technical knowledge and his quiet, private demeanor. By the age of 24, Carson had established a stable, purposeful life. He was deeply devoted to his family, maintaining a close bond with his mother, Darlene Sistrunk, and his father. Although he was a private person who kept his personal plans relatively quiet, he was reliable to a fault. It was this absolute reliability that made his sudden silence during the Labor Day weekend of 2022 so immediately alarming to his loved ones. On the afternoon of Sunday, September 4th, 2022, Carson told his father that he was heading out for the evening. He did not specify where he was going or whom he was meeting, but he left with a warm expression of affection, a routine that his family treasured. His mother had traveled to Texas with friends to attend a wedding, leaving Carson and his father at home. When his father woke up on Monday morning, which was Labor Day, he noticed Carson S. Silver Ford Raptor truck with its distinctive dark-colored hood was missing, but assumed Carson was simply out enjoying the holiday. When Miss Darlene returned from Texas on Monday evening, however, the atmosphere shifted from casual weekend relaxation to mounting concern. By 7:30 or 8 in the evening, Carson had not checked in, which was highly unusual for him. She sent a text message asking if he was on his way home, but received no response. Subsequent phone calls went directly to voicemail. The long, sleepless night that followed offered no answers, and by Tuesday morning, September 6th, the situation grew critical. Carson was scheduled to be at his welding job early that morning, but when his mother contacted his coworker and friend, she was met with the chilling news that Carson had not arrived. Knowing her son would never skip work or leave his family in suspense without a word, Miss Darlene immediately took action. She contacted Carson S. Financial Institution to inquire about recent transactions on his debit card, as she was a joint holder on his account. The bank representative revealed a single transaction that stood out like a beacon of concern: a purchase for fuel at a service station in New Hebron, Mississippi, at approximately 8:39 on Sunday evening. New Hebron was a tiny, rural community located approximately 51 miles south of their home in Pearl, Mississippi. The Sistrunk family had no friends, relatives, or associations in that area, making the transaction highly suspicious. Armed with this crucial piece of information and a sudden recollection that Carson had recently mentioned communicating with a young woman he met on the social media application Snapchat, Miss Darlene rushed to the Rankin County Sheriff's Department to report her son missing. The response from law enforcement was swift and highly coordinated. Recognizing that an otherwise stable, employed 24-year-old man does not simply vanish, investigators secured an exigent circumstances warrant to trace the last known signals of Carson S. mobile phone. The cellular data confirmed that his phone had last pinged in the New Hebron area on Sunday evening, aligning perfectly with the time and location of the fuel transaction. A regional alert, known as a Be on the Lookout broadcast, was immediately issued for Carson S. distinctive silver Ford Raptor. The first major breakthrough in the case occurred through a combination of vigilance and fortunate timing. A deputy with the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department, patrolling the rural roads near New Hebron, spotted the silver truck parked at the Old Hebron grocery. Observing several individuals gathered around the vehicle, the deputy wisely waited for backup to arrive to avoid alerting the occupants or causing a potential pursuit. When backup arrived, deputies approached the vehicle and encountered a group of young people, including a 20-year-old woman who was in possession of the truck keys and had been identified by witnesses as the driver. The young woman identified herself as Sierra Jane Inscoe. When questioned by investigators, Sierra claimed she had no knowledge of Carson Sistrunk and insisted she had acquired the vehicle legally. She produced a makeshift, handwritten document written on a plain piece of paper, claiming it was a bill of sale, showing she had purchased the high-end utility vehicle for $16,000 from a man she referred to only by the alias C Money. Investigators immediately recognized the document as highly suspect. A modern, expensive truck like a Ford Raptor would not realistically be sold for such a low sum on a crude piece of paper, nor would a legitimate transaction involve an unidentified individual using a street moniker. Sierra further claimed that this C Money character had threatened her, suggesting he might have obtained the vehicle through illicit means, but she maintained her complete innocence. The other males present with her at the grocery store explained that they had only recently met Sierra, who had recently moved to the area, and that she had been driving them around in the truck for the past few days. As investigators dug deeper into Sierra's background, a troubling portrait of a highly deceptive and transient lifestyle began to emerge. Sierra was described by acquaintances as a complex individual with a history of fabricating elaborate stories to gain attention, sympathy, and material goods. Originally from Tennessee, she had moved frequently, living at various times in Florida, Tennessee, and rural Mississippi, often staying with distant relatives, acquaintances, or in temporary trailers on agricultural properties. In high school, she had been known for her large, outgoing personality and her unique position as the only female player on her school's football team. However, behind this boisterous exterior lay a pattern of profound instability and dishonesty. Acquaintances later revealed that she had previously engaged in deceptive behaviors, including once falsely claiming to have cancer in order to secure rent-free living arrangements and evoke sympathy from those around her. During her initial formal interview at the sheriff's office, Sierra remained cooperative but highly deceptive. She claimed that she and her friends frequently visited remote gas and oil well sites in Jefferson Davis County to socialize and spend time outdoors. When investigators requested that she show them the specific location she had visited, her behavior became noticeably erratic. She repeatedly directed the deputies down incorrect roads and toward wrong sites, creating a frustrating series of dead ends that experienced investigators recognized as a classic tactic to stall for time and divert attention away from a crime scene. Eventually, she guided them to a secluded oil well site where the ground showed distinct tire tracks that matched the tread of Carson S. truck. However, no immediate physical evidence or signs of a struggle were found at that particular site. The investigation took a darker turn when the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation was called in to assist the local sheriff's departments. After midnight on September 7th, Agent Riley arrived at the scene where Carson S. truck had been secured on a flatbed recovery vehicle. Utilizing a flashlight to conduct an initial visual inspection of the vehicle, Agent Riley noticed highly alarming signs. There were visible traces of dried blood on the bottom of the tailgate and inside the crevices of the truck bed, suggesting an attempt had been made to wash the area clean with a water hose. Furthermore, a substantial amount of dried blood was discovered on the underside of the truck bed and coating the top of the spare tire underneath. Inside the cab of the truck, forensic teams discovered bags containing female clothing that also bore distinct blood spatter patterns. On the exterior, blood spattering was located on the rear windshield, indicating that a violent event had occurred while someone was positioned in or near the truck bed. When confronted with the discovery of the blood, Sierra offered an immediate explanation, claiming she had recently struck a deer with the truck and had placed the animal in the back, which accounted for the biological material. However, investigators noted that the truck showed absolutely no front-end collision damage, a physical impossibility if a vehicle of that size had impacted a large wild animal. Despite these glaring inconsistencies, investigators faced a difficult legal hurdle. At that moment, they had no body, no confirmed homicide, and no definitive proof that the blood belonged to Carson. After consulting with the local district attorney's office, it was determined that there was insufficient evidence to hold Sierra on a murder charge at that exact time, necessitating her temporary release from custody. Recognizing that time was of the essence, and that Sierra was likely highly familiar with the numerous secluded oil well sites scattered across the rural county, Agent Riley devised a brilliant and practical strategy. He contacted a personal friend who worked as a meter reader for the local utility company, whose job required daily visits to these highly remote, wooded well locations. Agent Riley instructed him to have his field technicians remain extraordinarily observant for anything unusual over the next few days. The efficiency of this community-focused initiative yielded immediate results. Within 15 to 20 minutes of that phone call, a technician reported discovering a deceased male body hidden in thick kudzu vines near a well site just a few miles away from the initial location Sierra had pointed out. Investigators rushed to the second well site, navigating a narrow dirt road that terminated at a secluded clearing. There, tire tracks clearly showed where a vehicle had backed up into the dense vegetation. Hidden beneath the thick foliage lay the body of a young man, showing advanced stages of decomposition due to the intense late summer heat. The physical condition of the remains made immediate visual identification impossible, but the clothing matched the description of what Carson had been wearing when he was last seen. The remains were carefully recovered and transported to the State Medical Examiner's office in Jackson for an official autopsy and identification. While awaiting the forensic results, investigators worked tirelessly to reconstruct Carson's final hours, focusing on the surveillance footage from the new Hebron service station, where the debit card had been used on Sunday night. The footage, captured shortly after 8 in the evening, showed Carson's silver truck pulling up to the fuel pumps. Although a heavy glare on the windshield obscured the passenger's face, a distinct figure could be seen sitting in the front passenger seat. Carson was shown entering the store, wearing the exact clothing later found on the recovered body and using his card. The footage also captured a local resident, known by the nickname Curly, approaching the passenger side of the truck and engaging in a brief, friendly conversation with the occupant. When investigators tracked down Curly and showed him the footage, he provided a critical piece of testimony. Curly, who had previously dated Sierra, positively identified her as the individual sitting in the passenger seat of Carson's truck on the night of his disappearance. This placed Sierra directly inside the victim's vehicle at the exact time of his last known movements, completely shattering her claim that she did not know Carson and had only purchased the truck later from a mysterious third party. Furthermore, local acquaintances began coming forward with highly incriminating observations. Several individuals reported that Sierra had bragged about obtaining a new truck for her upcoming birthday. despite having no steady source of income. Others recalled seeing her late Sunday night, attempting to thoroughly wash out the bed of the truck, acting in a highly anxious and unusual manner that made them deeply uncomfortable. The medical examiner's office soon delivered the definitive evidence needed to secure an arrest. Utilizing fingerprint analysis, they officially confirmed the identity of the remains as Carson Monroe Sistrunk. The autopsy revealed that Carson had suffered multiple gunshot wounds, specifically 2 to the chest and 1 to the head. Crucially, the forensic analysis of the wound trajectories indicated a slightly upward angle, suggesting that the shooter was standing on the ground while Carson was positioned higher up, likely sitting on the tailgate of his truck. The bullet fragments recovered from the body were consistent with a 9mm caliber firearm. Armed with a formal murder warrant, law enforcement officers located Sierra at a residence in Jones County, Mississippi, where she surrendered without incident. Following her arrest, Sierra attempted to maintain her innocence by introducing a new layer to her fabrication. She claimed that the mysterious C Money, whom she now identified by the first name of Corey, was a high-ranking member of an organized criminal group who had coerced her into participating in a vehicle theft and drug transportation scheme. She painted a picture of a wide-ranging conspiracy, prompting state and federal agencies, including narcotics units and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, to launch an exhaustive search for this individual. However, after 2 weeks of intensive investigation, law enforcement concluded that C Money was an entirely fictitious creation designed to deflect sole responsibility. Sierra had acted entirely alone, utilizing her digital connection with Carson to execute a calculated robbery. The digital forensic analysis of Sierra's social media accounts provided the final piece of the puzzle. Snapchat records recovered by investigators showed a clear trail of communication between Carson and Sierra leading up to Sunday, September 4th. The messages revealed that Sierra had lured Carson to New Hebron under the pretense of a social meeting or an outdoor adventure. Carson, a trusting and kind-hearted young man, drove 51 miles to meet her, unaware of her true intentions. Based on the blood spatter patterns, the upward trajectory of the gunshots, and the biological evidence, investigators reconstructed the final moments of the crime. Carson and Sierra had traveled to the secluded oil well site. While they were socializing, Carson sat on the tailgate of his beloved truck. Seizing an opportunity, Sierra gained access to one of the firearms Carson kept in his vehicle and fired multiple times, causing him to fall into the truck bed. She then drove the vehicle to the second well site, backed into the kudzu vines, removed his body from the truck, and fled the scene in his vehicle, attempting to clean the evidence later that evening. In July of the year 2024, as the case was prepared for trial, Sierra elected to plead guilty to second-degree murder. During her plea hearing, she delivered a 10-minute confession directly addressing Carson's grieving family, admitting that she had acted entirely alone and begging for their forgiveness. She was sentenced to 40 years in the custody of the Mississippi Department of Corrections, with 35 years to be served continuously, without the possibility of early release or parole, followed by 5 years of post-release supervision. This tragic case offers profound warnings and educational value for modern society. The primary motive of the perpetrator was a mixture of extreme material greed and a pathological desire to project a false image of success and status to her peers. In a culture increasingly influenced by social media, where material possessions are often equated with personal worth, Individuals who lack emotional stability can find themselves driven to extreme, irrational acts to obtain symbols of wealth, such as a high-end truck. The frequency of such modern catfishing crimes highlights the necessity for heightened digital vigilance. When communicating with individuals met online, it is imperative to verify their identity through multiple reliable channels and to ensure that any initial in-person meetings occur in well-lit, highly public spaces during daylight hours, rather than remote or secluded locations. For law enforcement, the rapid resolution of this complex case highlights the immense value of interagency cooperation, swift utilization of digital forensics, and active community engagement. By immediately collaborating with state agencies, utilizing cellular technology to narrow the search area, and leveraging the eyes and ears of local utility workers who frequented the rural landscape daily, investigators turned a potentially cold case into a resolved investigation within a matter of days. The memory of Carson Monroe Sistrunk, honored by over 700 members of his community who gathered at his memorial service, stands as a testament to a life lived with kindness, honesty, and hard work, while the swift delivery of justice ensures that those who seek to exploit the trust of others are held fully accountable under the law. The modern landscape of human connection has undergone a profound transformation with the rise of the digital era, bringing with it both the beautiful potential for instant community and the silent, dark avenues of deception. In previous generations, establishing a relationship required physical proximity, mutual acquaintances, and the gradual face-to-face building of trust. Today, a single swipe or a brief message sent through a social media application can bridge hundreds of miles in an instant. This boundaryless connectivity allows individuals to seek romance, friendship, and adventure far beyond their immediate geographic circles. However, this convenience also strips away the natural sensory checkpoints that human beings have relied on for thousands of years to evaluate the safety and sincerity of others. The digital screen acts as a powerful filter, allowing a user to project an idealized, entirely fabricated version of themselves, while hiding any potential malicious intentions. It is within this complex, high-stakes digital environment that tragic stories of catfishing and predatory behavior can unfold, often catching the most trusting and honest individuals completely off guard. When analyzing the deep-rooted motives behind crimes that begin in the virtual world and end in physical tragedy, one must look beyond the simple act of deception to the underlying psychological and sociological factors. In many such cases, the primary driver is not a grand, sophisticated criminal master plan, but rather an explosive combination of acute greed, low self-esteem, and a desperate desire for social validation. The perpetrator often operates under the delusion that acquiring material possessions through illicit means will instantly elevate their social status and grant them the respect they feel they are otherwise denied. In the specific context of rural and semi-rural communities, where public transit is limited and personal vehicles are viewed not just as transportation, but as major status symbols, a high-value truck can become an object of intense envy. This envy, when cultivated in a mind devoid of empathy and moral boundaries, can lead to the unthinkable decision to take a human life simply to possess a piece of machinery. The tragedy is amplified by the sheer asymmetry of the trade, wherein a precious human life, full of future promise and deep communal love, is extinguished for a physical object that will inevitably be tracked down by authorities in a matter of days. The frequency of these modern predatory cases is also fueled by the widespread normalization of casual online interactions. Young adults, raised in an environment where digital communication is second nature, often possess a sense of security when interacting with strangers online. They may assume that because they are good-natured and sincere, the person on the other side of the screen must share those same qualities. This vulnerability is especially pronounced among individuals who are naturally generous, adventurous, and protective of others. They are drawn to the prospect of helping someone or embarking on a spontaneous journey to meet a new friend, viewing the encounter as a harmless and exciting chapter in their lives. The predators, conversely, are highly skilled at identifying these positive traits and weaponizing them. They use the digital interface to study their targets, offer calculated bursts of affection or intrigue, and gradually lower the target's defenses until they agree to a physical meeting in a secluded, unfamiliar location. To understand how the justice system operates to resolve these complicated digital mysteries, one must examine the meticulous steps and crucial clues that law enforcement officers rely on during their investigations. When a person suddenly vanishes, detectives do not simply look for physical evidence at the last known location. They must construct a comprehensive digital and financial double of the victim's life. This process begins with a rapid, exhaustive analysis of the missing person's financial footprint. In the modern economy, almost every transaction leaves a permanent, time-stamped digital breadcrumb. By immediately contacting the victim's banking institution, investigators can map out the exact geographical route the victim took prior to their disappearance. A single automated teller machine withdrawal or a routine purchase of gasoline at a rural convenience store can instantly shift the focus of a search from a broad, multi-county area to a specific, localized community. This financial tracking is one of the most reliable and objective tools available to modern police forces, as it cannot be easily manipulated or erased by a fleeing suspect. In addition to financial records, the rapid acquisition of cellular telephone data represents a cornerstone of modern missing persons investigations. When local authorities realize that an individual is truly in danger, they can apply for an exigent circumstance warrant with the cellular provider to ping the missing person's phone. This technique measures the distance of the device from surrounding cellular towers, providing a general geographical area where the phone was last active. In remote, rural areas where towers are spaced far apart, the precision of these pings may be less exact than in dense urban centers, but they still provide an invaluable starting point for search and rescue operations. By cross-referencing the cellular pings with the exact times of financial transactions, investigators can confirm whether the victim's physical device was in the same location as their bank card, establishing a highly accurate timeline of their movements. Once the general area is established, the focus of the investigation shifts to local surveillance networks and the power of community observation. In small towns, where residents are highly familiar with their neighbors and routine patterns of life, the sudden appearance of an unfamiliar high-value vehicle immediately draws attention. Law enforcement agencies utilize a coordinated network of local patrols, issuing detailed alerts to neighboring counties regarding the make, model, and distinctive features of the missing person's vehicle. When a deputy spots such a vehicle, they must balance the urgency of recovery with the tactical necessity of keeping the situation controlled. By calling for backup and observing the vehicle from a safe distance, officers can identify everyone associated with the truck, preventing potential suspects from fleeing or destroying critical physical evidence. The confrontation with a suspect who is found in possession of a missing person S vehicle often reveals a fascinating psychological portrait of the criminal mind. Rather than displaying a high level of sophistication, these perpetrators frequently rely on hasty, highly implausible fabrications that quickly unravel under professional questioning. A classic example of this is the presentation of a handwritten, completely unofficial bill of sale, often scrawled on a scrap of paper, claiming that a highly valuable vehicle was purchased from an anonymous or fictitious individual for a fraction of its actual worth. This defensive tactic highlights a striking lack of foresight. The criminal often believes that as long as they have some form of written explanation, no matter how ridiculous, the police will be forced to accept it and let them go. They fail to realize that investigators are trained to examine the physical and logical consistency of every statement, and that a suspicious document only serves to deepen the investigators' resolve to uncover the truth. The sophistication of such criminals is almost always an illusion, characterized by short-term cunning rather than actual intelligence. While they may succeed in luring an unsuspecting victim through clever digital manipulation, their actions immediately following the crime are typically marked by panic, ignorance of forensic science, and a complete disregard for the digital footprints they leave behind. They may attempt to wash away physical evidence, such as blood, using simple household tools like a garden hose, completely unaware that modern forensic science can detect even microscopic traces of biological material clinging to the crevices of a vehicle. They do not realize that blood spatter patterns on a windshield can tell a detailed story of the physical dynamics of a violent event, or that the underside of a truck bed can shield biological evidence from superficial cleaning attempts. This gap between the criminal's perceived cleverness and the actual inescapable reality of forensic science is a recurring theme in modern homicide investigations. The physical search for a victim in a highly rural terrain presents one of the most daunting challenges for law enforcement agencies. In areas dominated by dense forests, winding dirt roads, and hundreds of active oil and gas well sites, locating a specific site can seem nearly impossible. These well sites, which are small, secluded clearings containing heavy machinery and storage tanks, are designed to be remote and are rarely visited by the general public. This seclusion makes them highly attractive to criminals looking to hide the evidence of their actions. To overcome this obstacle, investigators must rely on the deep, localized knowledge of the community. By partnering with local workers, utility meter readers, and pipeline maintenance crews who navigate these remote locations on a daily basis, police can multiply their eyes and ears on the ground. These workers are highly attuned to any unusual signs, such as fresh tire tracks leading into overgrown vegetation, or changes in the natural landscape, which can lead to a rapid discovery that might otherwise have taken weeks or months. Once a victim is located, the scientific rigor of the medical examiner's office becomes the voice of the deceased. In cases where the physical elements have accelerated the natural process of decomposition, visual identification may be impossible, and the cause of death may not be immediately obvious. Forensic pathologists utilize detailed anatomical examinations, dental records, and fingerprint retrieval techniques to officially confirm the identity of the victim. Furthermore, the analysis of the trajectory of any injuries can provide critical clues about the physical positions of both the victim and the perpetrator at the time of the incident. For instance, an upward trajectory of wounds can indicate that the victim was positioned on an elevated surface, such as the tailgate of a utility vehicle, while the shooter stood on the ground below. This forensic reconstruction is incredibly powerful in a courtroom, as it allows prosecutors to present a clear, scientifically backed narrative that directly refutes any self-defense claims or alternative theories presented by the defense. To build a flawless legal case, investigators must also bridge the gap between physical evidence and digital communication. By securing search warrants for social media companies, detectives can access the complete history of direct messages, media exchanges, and location data associated with the suspect S and victim S accounts. On platforms like Snapchat, where messages are designed to disappear after viewing, many users mistakenly believe that their conversations are gone forever. In reality, the underlying servers often retain transaction logs and metadata that can be legally retrieved. When these records show a direct, time-stamped conversation wherein the suspect coordinates a meeting with the victim at the exact time and location of their disappearance, the chain of custody and the proof of intent become virtually unbreakable. The social circle of the suspect often plays a major role in exposing the truth. Perpetrators who commit crimes out of a desire for social status almost always make the mistake of showing off their ill-gotten gains to their friends and acquaintances. They may construct elaborate, conflicting stories to explain how they suddenly acquired a luxury vehicle, claiming they received it as a birthday gift, bought it from an employer, or hit an animal and were cleaning the vehicle as a favor. These inconsistent narratives quickly create suspicion among their peers, especially when the suspect has no visible source of income or steady employment. When questioned by police, these acquaintances often provide crucial testimony, detailing the suspect's unusual behavior, her efforts to clean the vehicle, and her attempts to recruit others to help her manage or hide the vehicle. This community testimony, combined with physical and digital evidence, surrounds the suspect in a web of proof from which there is no escape. Reflecting on these tragic events yields profound life lessons that can help prevent similar occurrences in our communities. The most fundamental lesson is the necessity of maintaining a healthy, analytical skepticism when interacting with individuals online. While the vast majority of social media users are sincere, we must recognize that the digital space is also home to predators who excel at creating false personas. When transitioning an online relationship to the physical world, individuals should always establish strict safety protocols. This includes choosing highly public, well-lit locations with active surveillance cameras, such as a busy restaurant or a crowded shopping center, for the initial meeting. One should never agree to travel to remote, secluded areas or ride in a vehicle with someone they have just met, regardless of how friendly or persuasive that person may seem online. Furthermore, communication with family and trusted friends is a vital shield against danger. It is crucial to inform someone you trust of your exact plans, including the name of the person you are meeting, their social media profiles, the location of the meeting, and your expected return time. Establishing a routine check-in schedule can ensure that if something goes wrong, your loved ones will be alerted immediately and can provide authorities with a precise starting point for an investigation. In many cases, a delay of even 24 hours in reporting a disappearance can severely hamper search efforts, whereas an immediate, coordinated response can make a life-saving difference. We must also cultivate a culture of mutual support, where friends look out for one another and speak up if they notice a peer planning a potentially risky encounter. For law enforcement agencies, the speed of catching a perpetrator can be significantly enhanced through several key strategies. First, the integration of rapid digital forensics is paramount. Sheriff's departments and local police forces must have direct 24-hour access to specialized digital forensics units that can immediately analyze cellular data, bank transactions, and social media footprints without waiting days for standard administrative processing. Establishing pre-existing relationships and streamlined communication channels with major social media companies can allow investigators to secure emergency data releases in critical missing persons cases, potentially locating a victim before it is too late. Second, foster deep, active partnerships with the local community. By maintaining open lines of communication with rural workers, local businesses, and neighborhood groups, police can quickly mobilize a vast network of observers when a crisis occurs. In the case of rural communities, educating residents about the importance of reporting unusual vehicles, strange behavior at secluded locations, or sudden, unexplained wealth can lead to rapid, unsolicited tips that break a case wide open. Finally, the use of advanced public notification systems, such as immediate social media broadcasts and localized alerts, can turn the entire community into an active search force, leaving a fleeing suspect with nowhere to hide and no way to operate unnoticed. Let us now examine the narrative of this tragic case in the greatest possible detail, tracing the journey of Carson Monroe Sistrunk, his devoted family, and the dedicated investigators who brought his killer to justice. The story begins in the close-knit community of Flowood, Mississippi, where Carson was born on December 16, 1997. As the youngest of 3 sons born to Darlene and her husband, Carson was affectionately known as Little Man by his family and childhood friends. This nickname became a beloved, ironic joke as Carson grew into a towering, physically imposing young man, standing at 6'4" 4 inches tall and weighing nearly 300 pounds. Despite his massive size, Carson was known throughout his community as a gentle giant, a tender-hearted and bubble individual who possessed a sweet, protective spirit. He had a magnetic personality that naturally drew people to him, and he was deeply devoted to his family, his friends, and his faith. Carson shared a deep bond with his best friend, Tanner Gray, with whom he grew up. Their mothers were best friends, which naturally brought the 2 boys together from an early age. They spent their youth exploring the outdoors, hunting, fishing, and practicing their shooting skills at a range set up on a church member's property. Carson's love for the outdoors was a defining characteristic of his life, a passion he shared. Ve Kepite Hat, his father and brothers. As he transitioned into adulthood, Carson channeled his hands-on skills and work ethic into a promising career. He attended Deacon Mechanic School to specialize in welding, a trade he loved and excelled in. To further develop his talents, Carson also trained as a gunsmith, working 2 jobs to build a stable, successful future. He would work from 7 in the morning until 3:30 in the afternoon at a welding shop, and then immediately transition to his gunsmithing job, where he built and customized firearms with meticulous precision. By the age of 24, Carson had achieved a level of stability and independence that many young adults strive for. He was a highly respected welder and gunsmith, possessed a strong network of supportive friends, and owned a silver Ford Raptor utility truck. This truck, featuring a highly distinctive dark-colored hood, was his pride and joy, a physical symbol of the countless hours of hard work he had invested in his career. To personalize his beloved vehicle, he placed a custom tag on the back bearing his lifelong nickname, Little Man. Carson was a private person who tended to keep his personal life close to his chest, but he was incredibly responsible. Whenever he planned to be away for a weekend or a brief trip, he always informed his family when he would return, never leaving them to wonder about his safety. The tragic sequence of events began over the Labor Day holiday weekend in September of 2022. Carson S. mother, Darlene, had left Mississippi with some friends to attend a wedding in Texas, while Carson's father remained at home. On the afternoon of Sunday, September 4th, Carson spoke to his father, mentioning that he was going out for the evening. He did not specify where he was going, who he was meeting, or what his plans were, which was not unusual for a quiet, independent young man. He simply expressed his love for his father, promised to be careful, and drove away in his distinctive silver truck. Carson had recently connected with a young woman on the social media platform Snapchat, a digital interaction that he believed would lead to a fun, light-hearted weekend adventure, but which was actually a carefully laid trap. On Monday morning, September 5th, Carson S. father woke up and went to work as usual, not paying close attention to the fact that Carson S. truck was not parked in its normal spot, assuming his son was still out enjoying the holiday weekend. Darlene returned from her trip to Texas on Monday evening, expecting to find her youngest son at home. As the hours passed and the sun began to set, she noticed a growing, unsettling silence in the house. By 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the evening, Darlene decided to text Carson to ask if he was on his way back. She received no response. She then attempted to call his cellular phone, but the call went straight to voicemail. Darlene spent a sleepless night pacing the floors, her motherly instinct telling her that something was terribly wrong, as Carson would never ignore her calls or fail to check in. The sense of dread intensified on Tuesday morning, September 6th, when Carson failed to show up for his welding job. Darlene contacted the friend Carson worked with, who confirmed that Carson had not arrived and had not contacted anyone at the shop. Knowing her son's reliable work ethic, Darlene knew that she could no longer wait. She immediately took action, contacting Carson's banking institution to inquire about recent activity on his account, as she was a joint holder. The bank representative revealed a crucial piece of information. Carson's debit card had been used to purchase gasoline at a quick stop station in New Hebron, Mississippi, at approximately 8:39 in the evening on Sunday night. New Hebron was a tiny, highly rural community located 51 miles south of their home in Pearl, a place where Carson had no known friends, family, or business connections. Armed with this alarming information, Darlene rushed to the Rankin County Sheriff's Department to file a formal missing persons report. She explained the timeline of Carson's disappearance, the unusual financial transaction in New Hebron, and recalled a detail Carson had mentioned earlier. He had been communicating with a girl he met on Snapchat. The investigators immediately recognized the gravity of the situation. A young, exceptionally responsible man with no history of disappearing had suddenly vanished. His phone was off, and his vehicle was in a remote, unfamiliar part of the state. The Sheriff's Department initiated their missing persons protocol, contacting local hospitals and detention facilities, but found no record of Carson. To narrow down the search area, investigators secured an emergency cellular phone warrant, allowing them to ping Carson's device. The data confirmed that his phone had last been active in the general vicinity of New Hebron at approximately the same time as his last bank transaction. Recognizing that the distinctive silver Ford Raptor was the key to locating Carson, the Rankin County Sheriff's Department issued a statewide alert to all law enforcement agencies, detailing the vehicle's unique appearance and custom license plate. The breakthrough came through a stroke of professional vigilance when a deputy with the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department, patrolling the rural roads near New Hebron, spotted the silver truck parked at the Old Hebron grocery. The deputy, showing excellent tactical restraint, did not immediately approach the vehicle, as he did not want to alert anyone who might be inside or nearby. Instead, he called for immediate backup, allowing a coordinated force of officers to descend on the location. Upon their arrival, investigators found a group of individuals gathered around the truck. Among them was a 20-year-old woman who held the physical keys to the vehicle and had been actively driving it. She identified herself to the officers as Sierra Jane Inscoe. When questioned about the owner of the truck and the whereabouts of Carson Sistrunk, Sierra displayed a cold, detached demeanor, claiming she had absolutely no knowledge of anyone by that name and had never met Carson in her life. To justify her possession of the high-value utility truck, Sierra produced a highly suspicious handwritten document that she claimed was a legitimate bill of sale. The paper stated that she had purchased the Ford Raptor for $16,000 from a man she referred to only as C Money. She claimed she did not know this man's actual legal name, where he lived, or how he had come into possession of the truck, but asserted that he was a dangerous individual who had threatened her life if she spoke about him. The investigators immediately recognized the absurdity of her story. A high-value, customized vehicle like Carson's Raptor would easily command a price far exceeding $16,000, and the handwritten document was devoid of any legal validity. Despite their intense suspicion, the detectives knew they had to follow proper legal procedures and could not simply arrest Sierra without concrete proof of a crime. They began interviewing the 3 men who were found with her at the grocery store. These men explained that they had only recently met Sierra at month of work and had been riding around Vekep, Itahatter, in the silver truck for the past few days, believing she had legitimately acquired the vehicle. As investigators dug deeper into Sierra's background, they uncovered a portrait of a highly unstable, nomadic individual. Sierra had lived in Florida and Tennessee, moving frequently between relatives and friends, and had recently relocated to the northwest side of Jefferson Davis County to work on local poultry farms. Her acquaintances revealed a pattern of persistent manipulation, noting that she had a history of constructing elaborate falsehoods, including once falsely claiming to have cancer in order to gain sympathy and financial support from those around her. During her formal interview at the Rankin County Sheriff's Office, Sierra attempted to distance herself from any criminal activity by suggesting that she and her friends often visited remote gas and oil well sites in Jefferson Davis County to socialize. Detectives, sensing that these secluded locations might hold the key to Carson's whereabouts, asked Sierra to guide them to the sites she frequented. Sierra reluctantly agreed, but as they drove through the rural countryside, she repeatedly attempted to mislead the investigators, directing them down incorrect roads and leading them on frustrating rabbit trails. Eventually, she guided them to a specific, secluded well site. Upon inspecting the ground, investigators found fresh tire tracks that perfectly matched the tread pattern of Carson's Ford Raptor, confirming they were on the right track. The investigation took a dramatic and urgent turn when the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation was called in to assist. Agent Riley arrived at the scene shortly after midnight on September 7, 2022. As he examined the silver Ford Raptor, which had been placed on a flatbed transport vehicle, he shone his flashlight across the bed of the truck. He immediately noticed traces of blood on the bottom of the tailgate and inside the crevices of the truck bed, suggesting that someone had attempted to wash the area clean with a water hose. Looking closer, he discovered a significant accumulation of blood on the underside of the bed and on top of the spare tire, as well as distinct blood spattering on the rear windshield. When confronted with this gruesome discovery, Sierra offered another highly implausible explanation, claiming that she had recently struck a deer while driving and had transported the animal in the back of the truck. However, a physical inspection of the vehicle revealed absolutely no front-end collision damage, shattering her explanation. Investigators immediately detained Sierra on charges of vehicle theft, while forensic units meticulously documented the truck, recovering bags of female clothing from the back that appeared to be stained with blood spatter. These items, along with biological samples from the truck, were sent to the State Crime Laboratory in Jackson for urgent analysis. Recognizing that Sierra may have intentionally guided them to the wrong well site to conceal a deeper tragedy, Agent Riley took a brilliant, proactive step. He contacted a personal friend who worked for the local energy company, overseeing the daily maintenance and meter reading of the hundreds of gas wells scattered across the county. He requested that all field technicians remain exceptionally observant during their rounds. Within 20 minutes, this initiative paid off. A technician checking a remote well site on Gulf Camp Road discovered a deceased individual positioned among thick kudzu vines off a dirt access road. Investigators rushed to the second well site, where they found the body of a young man in an advanced state of decomposition due to the intense late summer heat. The physical condition of the body made immediate identification impossible, but the clothing matched the description of what Carson was wearing when he was last seen. The scene was meticulously processed, and the body was transported to the state medical examiner's office for a comprehensive autopsy. Meanwhile, because investigators still lacked absolute proof connecting Sierra to a homicide, they were legally required to release her from custody on the initial vehicle charge, a frustrating but necessary step in ensuring a legally sound prosecution. Determined to secure the necessary evidence, detectives focused on the digital and physical trail. They recovered surveillance footage from the New Hebron Quick Stop gas station, recorded shortly after 8 o'clock on the evening of September 4th. The footage showed Carson S. silver truck pulling up to the fuel pump with Carson driving. Although a glare on the windshield obscured the passenger S face, the video captured a second individual sitting in the front seat. The footage also showed Carson entering the store, utilizing his debit card, and interacting briefly with a local resident named Curly at the fuel pumps. When investigators located Curly and showed him the footage, he immediately identified the female passenger as Sierra Inscoe, whom he had known and dated in the past. This identification was the critical link the police needed, proving definitively that Sierra had been riding in the front seat of Carson S. truck at the exact time of his last known live appearance, directly contradicting her repeated claims that she had never met him. Further interviews with Sierra S. acquaintances revealed that she had bragged about acquiring a new truck for her birthday, despite having no employment or financial means to purchase such a vehicle. Some friends also reported seeing her attempting to wash blood out of the truck bed late Sunday night, acting highly anxious and erratic. The completion of the autopsy provided the final, undeniable pieces of the puzzle. The medical examiner confirmed the victim's identity as Carson Monroe Sistrunk through fingerprint analysis. The cause of death was determined to be multiple gunshot wounds from a 9mm firearm, with the trajectory of the wounds indicating that the shooter was positioned at a lower angle. Consistent with Carson sitting on the tailgate of his truck, while the perpetrators stood on the ground, armed with this forensic proof and the confirmed identification, authorities secured an arrest warrant for Sierra Jane Inscoe on the charge of murder. On the day of her arrest, state agents surrounded a residence in Jones County, Mississippi, where Sierra was hiding. She surrendered without incident. During subsequent questioning, she continued to cling to her story about the mysterious sea money, prompting a massive, multi-agency search for the alleged accomplice. However, after weeks of intensive investigation involving federal and state narcotics and firearms agencies, detectives concluded that sea money was an entirely fictitious creation, invented by Sierra to deflect sole responsibility for the crime. All of Sierra's local associates possessed verified alibis, leaving her as the sole perpetrator of the tragedy. A search warrant executed on Sierra's social media accounts provided the final motive and proof of premeditation. The recovered Snapchat records detailed the conversation between Sierra and Carson on the afternoon of Sunday, September 4th, showing that she had lured him to the remote location under the guise of a social meeting. Investigators concluded that after meeting at the secluded gas well site, Sierra, driven by pure greed and a desire to possess Carson's prized vehicle, turned his own firearm against him while he sat peacefully on the tailgate of his truck. She then transported his body a short distance, concealed it in the kudzu vines, and attempted to clean the vehicle to show it off to her friends. The legal proceedings culminated in July of 2024, facing an overwhelming mountain of physical, digital, and forensic evidence. Sierra Jane Inscoe chose to bypass a jury trial and entered a guilty plea to the charge of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 40 years in the Mississippi Department of Corrections, with 35 years to be served actively without the possibility of parole, followed by 5 years of post-release supervision. During her plea hearing, Sierra delivered a 10-minute confession, weeping as she admitted to acting alone, apologizing to Carson's family, and expressing her profound regret for a senseless act of violence motivated by a shallow desire for material status. The tragic loss of Carson Sistrunk deeply affected the entire community, as evidenced by the more than 700 grieving individuals who attended his memorial service to honor a young man who represented the very best of his community. Carson's legacy remains a powerful reminder of the enduring strength of family, the triumph of justice through meticulous and dedicated police work, and the vital importance of safety and vigilance in our increasingly connected digital world. His memory continues to be cherished by all who knew him, a gentle giant whose warmth and kindness could never be dimmed by the senseless actions of another. The quiet and vast landscapes of rural Mississippi are defined by their rolling hills, dense pine forests, and a slower, more deliberate pace of life. In these tight-knit communities, neighbors know one another, families remain rooted for generations, and a sense of shared trust is woven into the very fabric of daily existence. Yet, beneath this serene surface, the modern world has introduced new complexities, transforming the way people connect and sometimes exposing vulnerable individuals to unexpected dangers. The tragic loss of Carson Monroe Sistrunk in the late summer of 2022 stands as a solemn reminder of how quickly a life filled with promise can be derailed by the deceptive currents of the digital age. This case, while deeply sorrowful, highlights the extraordinary dedication of local law enforcement, the critical role of forensic science, and the profound power of community collaboration in seeking justice. To understand the tragedy, one must first understand the remarkable young man who was lost. Carson Monroe Sistrunk was born on December 16, 1997, in Fluid, Mississippi, the youngest of 3 brothers. From his earliest years, Carson was a vibrant and joyful presence in his family. Though he was born the smallest of the siblings, earned the affectionate lifelong nickname of Little Man. He eventually grew to a towering physical stature, standing 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighing right around 300 pounds. Despite his massive size, everyone who knew Carson described him as a gentle giant, a tender-hearted and quiet individual who possessed a sweet and drawing spirit. He was deeply close to his parents, particularly his mother, Darlene, and his father, with whom he shared a love for the outdoors. Along with his lifelong best friend, Tanner Gray, Carson spent much of his free time hunting, fishing, and practicing target shooting. He was a young man of steady character, deeply involved in his church community, and highly respected for his work ethic. By the age of 24, Carson had established a solid foundation for his future. He had successfully graduated from a technical school where he trained as a welder, a profession he thoroughly enjoyed. Showing a unique drive and dedication, he balanced 2 jobs, working as a welder from early morning until mid-afternoon, and then transitioning to a secondary position as a gunsmith. Carson possessed an exceptional knowledge of firearms, understanding their mechanics and assemblies with a level of expertise that commanded respect. He had purchased his dream vehicle, a distinctive silver Ford Raptor truck featuring a dark-colored hood, which he cared for meticulously. Because of his private nature, Carson kept his plans close to his chest, but he was always highly responsible. If he ever intended to travel or change his schedule, he made a point to inform his family, ensuring they never had cause to worry. The first indication that something was terribly wrong emerged over the Labor Day weekend in 2022. While his mother, Darlene, was out of state attending a wedding, Carson remained at home. On the afternoon of Sunday, September 4th, Carson told his father that he was heading out for the evening. He did not specify where he was going or whom he was meeting, a detail that was not unusual given his private demeanor, but he warmly bid his father goodbye, saying that he loved him and advising him to be careful. The following morning, Monday, his father went to work as usual, not initially noticing that Carson or his truck had not returned. When Darlene returned from her trip on Monday evening and realized Carson had not checked in, a deep sense of unease began to settle over her. She sent a text message around 7:30 in the evening, asking if he was on his way home, but received no reply. Subsequent phone calls went directly to voicemail, an unprecedented behavior for her generally attentive son. The gravity of the situation became undeniable on Tuesday morning, September 6th, when Carson failed to report to his welding job. His worried mother contacted his coworker, who confirmed that Carson had not arrived. Knowing her son's reliable character, Darlene immediately recognized that his silence indicated a severe emergency. In an effort to gather clues, she contacted his bank, on which she was a joint account holder, to inquire about any recent financial activity. The bank representative revealed a single transaction, a purchase of gasoline made at an automated teller machine at a gas station in New Hebron, Mississippi, on Sunday evening at approximately 8:39 post-meridian. New Hebron was a tiny, isolated rural community located 51 miles south of their home in Pearl. Carson had no known friends or connections in that area, making the transaction highly suspicious. Armed with this critical piece of information, Darlene hurried to the Rankin County Sheriff's Department to officially report her son missing. Upon receiving the missing person report, law enforcement immediately initiated standard protocols, checking local hospitals and regional detention facilities to rule out common emergencies. When these inquiries yielded no results, investigators recognized the urgency and applied for an exigent circumstance warrant with the cellular service provider to track Carson's mobile phone. The coordinates obtained from the cellular tower pings confirmed that the device had last connected in the general vicinity of New Hebron at the exact time of the gas station transaction. With the geographic focus established, the Rankin County Sheriff's Department issued a regional alert describing Carson S. silver and dark-hooded Ford Raptor truck. The first major breakthrough in the case occurred through sheer vigilance. A deputy with the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department patrolling the area of New Hebron spotted the distinctive truck parked outside the Old Hebron grocery. Recognizing the vehicle from the active alert, the deputy cautiously positioned himself to observe the scene while waiting for backup to arrive, ensuring that any potential suspects would not be startled into fleeing. Several individuals were gathered around the vehicle, including a young woman who was in possession of the keys. Once backup arrived, deputies detained the individuals to determine their connection to the missing young man and his vehicle. The young woman identified herself as 20-year-old Sierra Inscoe. When questioned by investigators, she claimed to have absolutely no knowledge of Carson's sistrunk. She presented an implausible explanation for her possession of the truck, asserting that she had purchased the high-end vehicle for $16,000 from a mysterious individual who went by the street name of C. Money. To support her claim, she produced a rudimentary document that she insisted was a bill of sale. A cursory inspection by the deputies revealed that this document was merely a handwritten note scribbled on a piece of scrap paper, a glaring red flag that cast immediate doubt on her story. Sierra further claimed that this C. Money figure was a dangerous individual who had threatened her life, suggesting she was merely a victim of circumstance. The other men detained at the grocery store stated they had no involvement with the truck's acquisition and had simply been driven around by Sierra over the past few days. They had recently met her through work and social connections. Investigators learned that Sierra was a transient individual, a drifter who had moved between Florida, Tennessee, and various parts of Mississippi, often staying in temporary trailers on agricultural properties or with acquaintances. She lacked a stable job, which immediately raised the question of how she could have legitimately acquired $16,000 to purchase a luxury truck. To delve deeper into the discrepancies, investigators transported Sierra to the Rankin County Sheriff's Office for a detailed interview. During the questioning, she mentioned that she and her friends frequently visited secluded locations, specifically old oil and gas wells in Jefferson Davis County, to socialize and hang out. Sensing that these isolated sites could hold key evidence, detectives requested that Sierra guide them to the location she had visited. Sierra agreed, but as they traveled into the rural areas, Her behavior became highly deceptive. She repeatedly redirected the officers, leading them on confusing paths and pointing out incorrect locations, a classic stalling tactic meant to frustrate the search. Eventually, Sierra directed investigators to a remote oil well site. There, forensic teams compared the tire tracks present on the dirt clearing with the tires of Carson S. Ford Raptor, which had been brought to the scene on a flatbed transport vehicle. The tracks matched, confirming that the truck had indeed been present at that secluded spot. Despite this verification, Sierra maintained her innocence, offering evasive and contradictory answers. The involvement of the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation brought a fresh perspective and advanced forensic expertise to the case. Shortly after midnight on September 7th, Agent Riley arrived to assist the local agencies. As he inspected the Ford Raptor on the transport trailer, his flashlight revealed alarming physical details. He observed faint traces of blood along the bottom of the tailgate and inside the crevices of the truck bed, suggesting that someone had attempted to wash the area clean with a water hose. Furthermore, a substantial amount of what appeared to be blood was discovered on the underside of the truck bed and coating the spare tire underneath. Inside the vehicle, investigators found bags containing female clothing that bore noticeable blood spatter. There was also blood spattered on the rear windshield of the cab. When confronted with these disturbing findings, Sierra offered another highly questionable explanation, claiming she had struck a deer and placed the animal in the back of the truck. However, the vehicle exhibited no front-end collision damage or cosmetic defects typical of an impact with large wildlife. Because there was not yet enough definitive evidence to charge her with a specific crime, and because the status of the missing person remained unconfirmed, the district attorney's office advised that she could not be held indefinitely, forcing law enforcement to temporarily release her. Undeterred, investigators worked tirelessly to gather concrete proof. Agent Riley, recognizing that Sierra's deceptive behavior during the search suggested she was familiar with multiple oil well locations, realized she may have led them to the wrong site to conceal evidence. He took a brilliant and highly practical initiative, contacting a personal friend who worked as a field inspector reading meters at the numerous well sites across the county. Riley requested that the field crews be exceptionally observant for anything unusual during their daily rounds. Within 15 minutes, an inspector called back with a devastating update. A body had been discovered at a different oil well site located a few miles away. Detectives rushed to the newly identified site, a remote clearing accessible only by a dirt road. There, they observed tire tracks that backed into a dense patch of kudzu vines. Hidden within the overgrown vegetation lay the remains of a young man, showing significant signs of decomposition due to the intense late summer heat. The physical state of the body made an immediate identification impossible, but the clothing matched the description of what Carson was wearing when he was last seen. The remains were carefully recovered and transported to the State Medical Examiner's office in Jackson for an autopsy and formal identification. Meanwhile, investigators focused on reconstructing the timeline of events leading up to the disappearance. They visited the Quick Stop gas station in New Hebron, where the automated teller machine transaction had occurred. Reviewing the surveillance footage from Sunday, September 4th, at approximately 8 post-meridian, they witnessed Carson S. silver truck pulling up to the fuel pumps. Carson was indeed driving, but the footage clearly showed a passenger sitting in the front seat, though a glare on the windshield obscured their identity. The video captured Carson entering the store to pay for his purchase, wearing the exact clothing later found on the recovered remains. The surveillance footage also captured a local resident, known by the nickname of Curly, approaching the passenger side of the truck and engaging in a brief conversation with the occupant. Investigators tracked down Curly and presented him with the video. He immediately identified the passenger as Sierra Inscoe, whom he had known and dated in the past. Curly was quickly ruled out as a suspect, but his statement provided the crucial link, proving that Sierra had been riding in Carson S. truck on the night of his disappearance, directly exposing her initial claims of never meeting him as a complete fabrication. Further interviews with Sierra's acquaintances revealed that she had recently boasted to friends that she would acquire a new vehicle before her upcoming birthday. When she suddenly began driving the impressive Ford Raptor, her peers became suspicious, knowing she lacked the financial means to make such a purchase. Furthermore, several individuals recalled seeing blood in the truck bed, to which Sierra had offered a variety of conflicting explanations, claiming alternately that she had hit a dog, a wild hog, or a deer, and that the previous owner had been responsible for the mess. Her erratic behavior and attempts to wash the vehicle had alarmed her social circle, causing them to distance themselves from her. The state medical examiner's office completed the autopsy, utilizing fingerprint analysis to officially identify the decedent as Carson Monroe Sistrunk. The examination concluded that the cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds, specifically 2 to the chest and 1 to the head. Crucially, the forensic analysis revealed that the bullets had traveled on a slightly upward trajectory. Given Carson S.'s exceptional height of 6 feet 4 inches, this physical evidence indicated that the shooter was standing on the ground while Carson was positioned higher, likely sitting on the tailgate of his truck. The fragments recovered from the wounds were determined to have been fired from a 9mm caliber firearm. With the positive identification and the scientific determination of homicide, law enforcement secured an arrest warrant for Sierra Inscoe. 2 days after her initial release, state and local agents surrounded a residence in Jones County, Mississippi, where she was staying. Sierra surrendered without incident. Upon her arrest, she requested to speak with investigators again, attempting to maintain her narrative about the mysterious sea money. She claimed his first name was Corey and alleged that he was associated with criminal organizations, suggesting he had orchestrated the crime. However, investigators remained skeptical of her claims regarding an accomplice. Given Carson S.'s physical size, they initially questioned how a small young woman could have managed the physical demands of the crime alone. Yet, a meticulous investigation into her social circle and the alibis of her acquaintances ruled out any other potential accomplices. The search for the elusive sea money led to a dead end, with multiple state and federal agencies confirming that no such individual existed in the regional criminal databases. Law enforcement concluded that sea money was an entirely fictitious creation designed to deflect guilt. The definitive evidence linking Sierra to the crime came from digital forensics. A search warrant executed for Sierra's social media accounts yielded crucial communication records from Snapchat. The data revealed that Sierra had actively communicated with Carson on the day of his disappearance, luring him to meet her in New Hebron under the pretense of an adventure or a social gathering. This digital trail proved a premeditated effort to entice Carson to the secluded area. Based on the totality of the physical, digital, and circumstantial evidence, Investigators reconstructed the tragic sequence of events. Sierra had lured Carson to the remote oil well site in Jefferson Davis County. Carson, possessing a trusting and kind nature, had driven her to the secluded spot. At some point during their meeting, Carson sat on the tailgate of his truck. He kept several firearms in his vehicle, including a pistol in the center console. Sierra, motivated by an intense desire to possess the luxury vehicle, obtained one of his firearms and fired upon him from her position on the ground. She then utilized the vehicle to transport and conceal his remains in the dense kudzu vines at the second well site, attempting to wash away the physical evidence afterward. The DNA analysis of the blood found on the female clothing inside the truck confirmed a match to both the victim and Sierra, securing an airtight case for the prosecution. The legal proceedings were set to culminate in a trial scheduled for July of 2024. However, faced with an overwhelming mountain of scientific and physical evidence, Sierra chose to bypass a jury trial. She entered a guilty plea to the charge of second-degree murder. During her plea hearing, she utilized the opportunity to address Carson's family directly, delivering a highly emotional 10-minute confession. She openly admitted to her actions, stating clearly that she had committed the act alone, begged for forgiveness, and claimed she did not understand what had driven her to commit such a senseless deed. The court sentenced her to 40 years in the custody of the Mississippi Department of Corrections, with 5 years suspended, requiring her to serve 35 years of active confinement under post-release supervision, with no possibility of early parole. The motive behind this devastating crime reveals a profound psychological disconnect, where the superficial desire for material status completely eclipsed the value of a human life. Sierra Inscoe, struggling with a lack of personal stability, an absent family structure, and a deep-seated insecurity, sought validation through material possessions. She had convinced herself that acquiring a prestigious luxury vehicle would elevate her social standing and allow her to fit in with her peers. This shallow ambition, combined with a complete lack of empathy, drove her to plan and execute a modern-day ambush on a gentle, hard-working young man who had shown her nothing but kindness. The investigation of this case highlights the critical importance of swift, methodical police work and the seamless integration of different investigative resources. The initial promptness of Carson's mother in checking financial records provided the crucial geographic starting point, allowing law enforcement to narrow their search field immediately. The rapid acquisition of cellular tower data and the subsequent physical location of the vehicle demonstrated the hot efficiency of modern electronic tracking. Furthermore, this case illustrates how traditional community relations remain one of the most powerful tools in an investigator's arsenal. Agent Riley's decision to contact a local utility worker to monitor the remote well sites is a brilliant example of creative problem-solving. While advanced technology can track signals and map coordinates, the physical search of vast rural terrains often relies on the eyes and ears of the people who work and live in those environments daily. By leveraging this local network, law enforcement transformed what could have been a weeks-long search into a rapid discovery, preserving vital forensic evidence that would have otherwise degraded in the elements. This tragic event offers vital safety lessons for the wider community, particularly regarding interactions initiated through digital platforms. Social media applications and messaging services offer unprecedented ease of connection, but they also allow individuals to construct entirely false personas. It is essential especially for young adults, to maintain a high degree of caution when planning to meet individuals met online. Such meetings should always occur in highly visible, public locations during daylight hours, and trusted friends or family members should always be informed of the specific plans, locations, and identities of those involved. Carson Monroe Sistrunk was a young man of exceptional character, deeply loved by his family, friends, and community. Over 700 people gathered at his memorial service, a testament to the profound impact his kind and gentle spirit had on those around him. His best friend, Tanner Gray, bore the heavy honor of serving as a pallbearer, reflecting on a lifetime of shared memories and a friendship that would endure in his heart forever. While the loss of Carson leaves an irreplaceable void in the lives of those who loved him, the relentless pursuit of truth by the investigating agencies ensured that the perpetrator of this senseless act was held fully accountable, allowing justice to prevail and honoring the memory of a truly beloved young man. The investigation into the tragic disappearance and passing of Carson Monroe Sistrunk is a deeply solemn narrative that highlights both the profound depths of human grief and the relentless dedication of the law enforcement professionals who sought justice for his family. This case, which unfolded in the early autumn of the year 2022 in the state of Mississippi, serves as a poignant reminder of the vulnerabilities inherent in our highly connected digital era. By examining the psychological motives of the perpetrator, the meticulous techniques of the investigators, and the critical lessons that communities can extract from such tragedies, we can find a pathway to better protect the innocent and ensure that justice remains a steadfast pillar of our society. To understand the weight of this case, one must first understand the young man whose life was so abruptly and senselessly cut short. Carson Monroe Sistrunk was born on December 16th in the year 1997 in Flowood, Mississippi. He was the youngest of 3 brothers, often affectionately referred by his family as the baby of the household. Although he was born the smallest of his siblings, he eventually grew to become an imposing physical presence, standing at an impressive 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighing nearly 300 pounds. Despite his towering stature, those who knew him best described him as a gentle giant and a tender-hearted individual who possessed a quiet, sweet, and caring spirit. His best friend since early childhood, Tanner Gray, recounted how their mothers had been close friends, meaning that their own friendship was practically preordained. Together, they spent countless hours exploring the great outdoors, house-sitting, practicing target shooting with small-caliber pistols, and embracing the peaceful rural life of Mississippi. Carson was a young man who had successfully aligned his personal passions with his professional ambitions. After graduating from high school in the year 2016, he attended a technical school to become a professional welder. He loved the craft of working cape-a-tay hat metal and quickly added gunsmithing to his repertoire of skills. His daily routine was a testament to his work ethic, as he would work from 7 in the morning until 3:30 in the afternoon at a welding establishment, before transitioning to his secondary job as a gunsmith, where he would build and customize firearms. He was highly knowledgeable in his field, a trait that won him the respect of his peers and colleagues. By the age of 24, Carson was a productive, responsible, and remarkably self-reliant young man who had built a stable life surrounded by a loving family and a supportive community. The unexpected silence that began over the Labor Day holiday weekend in the year 2022 was the first indication that something was terribly wrong. Carson was a deeply private person when it came to his personal relationships, often keeping his cards close to his chest, following previous romantic disappointments. However, he was also highly responsible and never failed to check in with his family or show up for his scheduled work shifts. On September 4th, the year 2022, Carson informed his father that he was heading out for the evening, offering a warm farewell and a promise to be careful. At the time, his mother, Darlene Sistrunk, was traveling back from a wedding in Texas, expecting to return home the following day. When she arrived back in Mississippi on the evening of Monday, September 5th, she noticed that Carson had not yet returned. As the hours ticked by on that Monday evening, a mother's intuition began to raise alarms. Darlene attempted to contact her son, sending text messages around 7:30 and 8 in the evening, but received no response. Subsequent phone calls went straight to voicemail, leading to an agonizing night of sleepless worry. Because it was a federal holiday, Carson did not have work on Monday, which temporarily explained his absence to some degree. However, when Tuesday morning arrived and Carson failed to show up for his welding job, his mother contacted his workplace only to find that his colleagues had not seen him. Knowing deep down that such behavior was entirely uncharacteristic of her reliable son, Darlene immediately made her way to the Rankin County Sheriff's Department on Tuesday, September 6th, the year 2022, to report him missing. In the initial stages of a missing person investigation, law enforcement officers must systematically eliminate various possibilities, checking local hospitals and regional detention facilities to ensure the individual has not been admitted or detained. When these inquiries yielded no results, the deputies began to piece together the final known movements of Carson. Darlene provided a crucial early clue. Carson had recently mentioned meeting a young woman through the social media application Snapchat. While Carson had not shared many details about her identity, he had indicated that they had met in person on a few occasions. Acting on this vital information, investigators applied for an exigent circumstance warrant to obtain cellular phone records and trace the last known location of Carson's mobile device. Simultaneously, Darlene contacted Carson's financial institution, utilizing her access to his account to review his recent transactions. The records revealed a transaction for fuel at a gas station in New Hebron, Mississippi, which had occurred at aphmau, approximately 8:30 in the evening. On Sunday, September 4th, New Hebron was a small, highly rural community located approximately 51 miles south of their home in Pearl, a place where Carson had no known friends, relatives, or professional ties. This geographic discrepancy immediately intensified the concerns of both the family and the investigators, as it suggested that Carson had traveled a significant distance into an unfamiliar area to meet someone. With this new geographic focal point, the Rankin County Sheriff's Department issued a nationwide alert, commonly referred to as a Be on the Lookout alert, for Carson's highly distinctive vehicle. Carson drove a silver Ford Raptor, a large and expensive pickup truck featuring a unique dark-colored hood and a custom license plate that bore his childhood nickname, Little Man. The dissemination of this vehicle description paid off almost immediately due to a fortunate coincidence. A deputy with the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department, patrolling the rural roads near the Old Hebron Grocery, spotted a vehicle matching the description of the silver Ford Raptor parked at the establishment. Understanding the potential danger and the sensitivity of the situation, the deputy did not immediately rush the vehicle. Instead, he observed the scene and waited for backup to arrive, noting that several individuals were gathered around the pickup truck. Among these individuals was a 20-year-old woman who held the physical keys to the truck and was identified by others as the primary driver of the vehicle over the preceding couple of days. This young woman identified herself as Sierra Jane Inscoe. When questioned by the arriving detectives, Sierra claimed she had absolutely no knowledge of Carson Sistrunk and asserted that she had recently purchased the expensive truck from an individual, Shikanoive Kep, only by the street alias of C Money. To support her claim of legitimate ownership, Sierra presented the investigators with a handwritten document intended to serve as a bill of sale. The document asserted that she had purchased the vehicle for the sum of $16,000, written out on a simple piece of paper. To the seasoned eyes of the investigators, this document was immediately suspicious, as the market value of a specialized Ford Raptor vastly exceeded $16,000, and the informal nature of the paperwork strongly suggested a hasty fabrication. Despite their deep skepticism, the detectives knew they had to follow every lead and could not simply dismiss her story without further verification. They also questioned the 3 male companions who were with Sierra at the grocery store. These men explained that they had only recently met Sierra, who was a newcomer to the area, and that she had been driving them around in the silver truck for the past few days. As the investigation intensified, Sierra was detained for further questioning, and the silver truck was secured by law enforcement. Detectives from the Rankin County Sheriff S Department and the Lawrence County Sheriff S Department worked in tandem, eventually seeking the specialized assistance of the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation. When an agent from the Bureau inspected the vehicle under the illumination of a flashlight, the suspicious nature of the case transformed into a clear indication of a violent crime. The agent observed what appeared to be biological stains along the bottom seam of the tailgate, suggesting that someone had attempted to wash the truck bed with a water hose. Furthermore, a closer inspection of the undercarriage of the vehicle revealed a significant amount of biological material on the underside of the truck bed and on top of the spare tire, which had been shielded from the washing process. Biological spatter was also noted on the rear windshield of the cab, suggesting that an incident had occurred while someone was positioned in the back of the truck. When confronted with these alarming forensic findings, Sierra offered an alternative explanation, claiming that she had recently struck a deer with the truck and had placed the animal in the truck bed, which she claimed accounted for the biological material. However, the investigators quickly noted that the vehicle bore absolutely no physical damage, denting, or hair consistent with a collision with a large wild animal. Sierra also mentioned that she and her friends frequently visited secluded natural areas, specifically the numerous active oil and natural gas well sites scattered across the rural landscape of Jefferson Davis County, to socialize and relax. Recognizing that Sierra possessed intimate knowledge of these isolated locations, investigators asked her to guide them to the sites she had recently visited. This process proved to be highly frustrating, as Sierra repeatedly directed the detectives down incorrect roads and toward unrelated well sites, a tactic that the investigators interpreted as an intentional effort to delay and mislead the search. Eventually, she guided them to a specific remote well site where the tire tracks in the dirt matched the unique tread pattern of Carson Seth's Ford Raptor. A thorough search of this initial site with metal detectors yielded no further physical evidence or signs of Carson, prompting the investigators to suspect that Sierra was continuing to conceal the true location of the incident. The breakthrough in the geographic search came from a combination of local knowledge and community cooperation. Recognizing that a person familiar with the daily operations of the local utility fields would have the best chance of spotting anything unusual, a state agent contacted a personal friend who managed the maintenance and reading of meters at the local gas and oil wells. The agent requested that the utility workers remain highly vigilant as they traveled their daily routes through the secluded areas. This cooperative effort produced results with remarkable speed. Within approximately 15 to 20 minutes of the phone call, a utility driver reported discovering a deceased individual at a separate oil well site located a few miles away from the initial location. Investigators rushed to the second well site, which was accessed by a remote dirt road. At the edge of the cleared site, they observed tire tracks that led directly toward a dense growth of local vegetation, specifically kudzu vines, where the vehicle had clearly backed up to the edge of the clearing. Concealed within the thick foliage was the body of a young man. The sweltering late summer heat of early September had accelerated the natural processes of decomposition over the preceding 3 days, making an immediate visual identification impossible. The scene was meticulously documented, and the remains were secured by the county coroner to be transported to the state medical examiner's office in Jackson for a formal autopsy and identification. While the forensic medical team worked to identify the deceased, detectives conducted a formal interrogation of Sierra Inscoe back in Rankin County. Sierra remained steadfast in her denials, reiterating that she did not know Carson, had never met him, and was completely uninvolved in any unlawful activity. At that precise moment, despite the overwhelming suspicion, the investigators lacked the definitive forensic identification of the body and the direct physical evidence linking Sierra to the act of violence itself. Following consultations with the local district attorney's office, it was determined that there was insufficient legal ground to hold Sierra on a charge of murder at that exact moment. Consequently, she was temporarily released from custody, a decision that, while frustrating to the investigators, was a necessary adherence to constitutional due process. The release of the primary suspect only served to galvanize the investigative team, who immediately focused on securing the definitive proof required to secure a conviction. They turned their attention to the Quick Stop gas station in New Hebron, where Carson's debit card had been used on the night of his disappearance. Upon reviewing the establishment's digital surveillance footage from approximately 8 o'clock, on the evening of Sunday, September 4th, investigators obtained undeniable visual confirmation. The video clearly showed Carson driving his silver Ford Raptor up to the fuel pumps. He was wearing the exact clothing that was later found on the recovered remains, providing a vital link for the physical identification process. Crucially, the surveillance footage also revealed the presence of a passenger in the front seat of the truck. Although a glare on the windshield prevented a clear view of the passenger's face, the video captured a local resident, known by the nickname Curly, approaching the passenger side of the vehicle and engaging in a brief conversation with the occupant. Investigators quickly tracked down Curly and presented him with the surveillance footage. He immediately and confidently identified the passenger as Sierra Inscoe, whom he knew personally from a prior social relationship. This identification was a monumental turning point in the case, as it completely demolished. Sierra's repeated assertions that she had never met Carson and had only acquired the truck days later from a mysterious third party. Further interviews with local residents and acquaintances of Sierra began to paint a consistent portrait of her behavior and reputation. Acquaintances revealed that Sierra had been boastfully predicting for several weeks that she would soon possess a brand new, highly desirable vehicle in time for her upcoming birthday. When she suddenly began driving a premium silver Ford Raptor, those who knew her financial situation, specifically her lack of steady employment or income, became deeply suspicious. Some acquaintances recalled seeing Sierra attempting to wash out the bed of the truck late on Sunday night, acting in an uncharacteristically nervous and erratic manner. When asked about the biological stains, she had provided a dizzying array of contradictory explanations to different people, claiming variously that she had struck a deer, a dog, or a wild hog, and at one point even claiming that the truck's owner had hit an animal. The final pieces of the evidentiary puzzle fell into place through forensic science. The state medical examiner's office successfully processed a clear fingerprint from the recovered remains, officially confirming that the deceased was indeed Carson Monroe Sistrunk. The autopsy revealed that the cause of death was multiple wounds from a firearm, with the internal paths of the projectiles indicating a slightly upward trajectory. This geometric detail was highly consistent with a scenario in which the victim was positioned on an elevated surface, such as the open tailgate of a pickup truck, while the shooter was standing on the ground below. Furthermore, the State Crime Laboratory processed the biological samples taken from the truck and the female clothing found in the vehicle. The analysis confirmed that the blood belonged exclusively to Carson, and the deoxyribonucleic acid extracted from the stained clothing belonged to Sierra Inscoe. Armed with a definitive forensic identification and an array of physical and testimonial evidence, the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation and local deputies obtained an arrest warrant for Sierra. 2 days after her initial release, law enforcement tactical units surrounded a residential address in Jones County, Mississippi, where Sierra was hiding. The arrest was executed safely and without incident as she surrendered to the officers. During her subsequent custody, Sierra attempted to introduce yet another narrative, claiming that the mythical C. Money, whom she now identified as an individual named Korive Kepaite, had alleged illicit organizational ties, had forced her to participate in the crime. She argued that as a young woman of average physical stature, she could not have physically manipulated Carson's large frame by herself. However, an exhaustive investigation into this claim by state and federal authorities, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, revealed that no such individual existed. Her local companions all possessed verified alibis, leaving investigators with the firm conclusion that Sierra had acted entirely alone, utilizing physical leverage and the sudden, unexpected use of a firearm to accomplish her goals. The digital footprint of the crime was officially secured when investigators obtained a search warrant for Sierra's Snapchat account. The social media records revealed the direct exchange between her and Carson on the afternoon of Sunday, September 4th, coordinating their meeting in New Hebron. The evidence suggested that Sierra had systematically targeted Carson, exploiting his trusting nature and desire for social connection to lure him into a secluded, highly vulnerable environment under the pretense of a social gathering. Once in the remote setting of the oil well site, she had taken advantage of his relaxed state, gained access to a firearm he kept within the vehicle, and used it to end his life solely for the purpose of stealing his valued pickup truck to elevate her social status among her peers. The motive of the perpetrator stands as a chilling monument to the destructive nature of modern materialistic greed and the pursuit of superficial validation. Inscoe's personal history was characterized by a pattern of severe pathological deceit and antisocial behavior. Acquaintances later revealed that she had previously gone so far as to fabricate a terminal cancer diagnosis, complete with shaved head and public appeals, in order to elicit sympathy, secure financial donations, and live rent-free with unsuspecting benefactors. This history of profound manipulation demonstrates a complete absence of empathy and a willingness to exploit the kindness of others for personal gain. Her actions in the year 2022 represent the extreme culmination of this pathology, where the desire to possess a luxury vehicle to impress her social circle completely eclipsed the value of a human life. This case highlights a disturbing societal trend wherein the superficial markers of wealth and lifestyle, magnified by the digital looking glass of social media, can become powerful catalysts for extreme violence in individuals who lack a stable moral foundation. The tragic frequency of cyber luring and catfishing cases in modern society can be directly attributed to the anonymity and false sense of intimacy fostered by digital communication platforms. Social media applications allow individuals to construct entirely fabricated personas, hiding their true intentions behind carefully curated digital profiles. For trusting and genuinely kind individuals like Carson, who was simply seeking a genuine human connection and a new social adventure, these platforms can become highly perilous traps. The casual, transient nature of communication on applications like Snapchat often bypasses the traditional safety checks and social boundaries that protect individuals in face-to-face interactions, allowing predatory individuals to quickly establish a false sense of trust and lure victims into highly dangerous, isolated settings. When we analyze the investigative process, it becomes clear that the successful resolution of this case relied on a combination of traditional detective work, community vigilance, and advanced forensic science. The primary clues that allowed the police to dismantle Sierra's elaborate web of lies began with the immediate proactive response of Carson S. mother, whose quick action in checking his financial records provided a critical geographic starting point. The sharp eyes of the patrolling deputy, who located the distinctive truck at the grocery store, prevented the vehicle from being concealed or destroyed. Furthermore, the systematic collection of biological evidence from the hidden crevices of the truck bed and undercarriage ultimately provided the undeniable physical proof that linked the vehicle to a violent crime, rendering Sierra's claims of hitting a wild animal completely untenable. The sophistication of the perpetrator in this case was remarkably low, characterized by a series of clumsy, short-sighted decisions that stood in sharp contrast to the gravity of her crime. Sierra appeared to operate under the naive belief that she could simply wash away the evidence of a violent crime with a standard garden hose, and that a handwritten note on a scrap of paper would satisfy the legal requirements of a vehicle transfer. Her choice to drive a highly recognizable, stolen vehicle in the very county where the owner had gone missing, while simultaneously telling multiple conflicting stories to her acquaintances, demonstrates an absolute lack of foresight. It was this very lack of sophistication, the sheer carelessness of her lies, and her inability to comprehend the reach of modern forensic science that allowed investigators to systematically expose her guilt. Several profound life lessons can be drawn from this immense tragedy to help prevent such occurrences in the future. First and foremost is the necessity of exercising extreme caution when transitioning digital relationships into the physical world. In an era where we can instantly connect with individuals across vast distances, it is vital to maintain a healthy level of skepticism and prioritize personal safety. When planning to meet someone met online for the first time, individuals should always choose highly public, well-lit environments and avoid traveling to remote or secluded locations, regardless of how comfortable the digital interactions may have felt. Furthermore, it is essential to keep family members or close friends fully informed of one's plans, including the specific identity of the person being met, the planned itinerary, and regular check-in times. Had Carson S. family known the exact identity of the individual he was traveling to meet, the initial response could have been initiated even faster. For law enforcement agencies, this case offers valuable strategies for accelerating the apprehension of perpetrators in similar situations. The rapid sharing of information across county lines and the immediate utilization of digital alerts for distinctive vehicles are critical in preventing suspects from fleeing or destroying key evidence. Additionally, the integration of community networks, such as the utility workers who operate daily in remote, rural areas, proves to be an invaluable resource in search operations where traditional search methods may be limited by vast geographic terrain. By fostering strong relationships with local businesses, utility companies, and the public, police forces can dramatically expand their eyes and ears on the ground, leading to faster recoveries and the swift collection of fleeting physical evidence. The legal resolution of this case brought a measure of closure to the grieving community of Pearl and the surrounding region. Although the trial was originally scheduled for July of the year 2024, nearly 2 years after Carson's life was taken, the overwhelming weight of the evidence secured by the prosecution led to a negotiated plea agreement. Sierra Jane Inscoe pleaded guilty to the charge of second-degree murder. During her formal plea hearing, she offered a 10-minute address directly to Carson S. family, during which she openly admitted her sole responsibility for the crime, expressed remorse, and begged for their forgiveness. She was sentenced to a term of 40 years in the custody of the Mississippi Department of Corrections, with 35 years of the sentence to be served actively behind bars without the possibility of early parole, followed by 5 years of post-release supervision. Under Mississippi state law for this category of offense, she is legally required to serve every single day of those 35 years. The memory of Carson Monroe Sistrunk remains a powerful force for good in the hearts of those who loved him. At his memorial service, more than 700 people gathered to pay their respects, a testament to the profound impact his kind, gentle, and hard-working nature had on his community. As his best friend Tanner Gray carried him to his final resting place, the collective grief of the community was matched by a deep determination to honor Carson's legacy of warmth, integrity, and love for the simple joys of life. While nothing can truly reverse the pain of his loss, the triumph of justice in this case stands as a powerful reassurance that the dedication of law enforcement, the vigilance of the community, and the unyielding power of the truth will always prevail over the dark forces of greed and deceit.